Praise be to God. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and He has no partners. Inshallah, in this khutbah, we will try to understand from the Quran and all of God's divine scriptures about the importance of thoughts. What is the importance of thoughts, the human thought, in the Quran? Does the Quran say anything about the human thought, what we think every day? Today, in many forms, from many people, from various kinds of preachers, mentors, motivators, motivational speakers, we hear these buzzwords. We hear a lot about positive thinking, avoiding negative thinking, thinking big, and also wishful thinking, happy thoughts, sad thoughts, etc. Thoughts are believed by some to have an impact on life. Some people take it to a different level. However, they focus too much on the human thought. But what does God's scriptures say? Because we are followers of God's scriptures and we follow the truth only, and we only accept what is confirmed and preached by God through His messengers, our reference will always remain God's scriptures. If we do not find any idea that is not supported in the Quran, we do not take them as divine truth. In the Bible, we see in Proverbs 23:7 a verse which says, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, said he to thee, but his heart is not with thee." This Bible verse says that as a man thinks, he is. In other words, a man is in a sense what he thinks and not what he says or does. So if you ask, are you a believer, or you are only considered a believer according to divine scriptures based on what you think. It's not based on what you say or merely on what you say or what you do. It is based on what you think. What is your thoughts? So a believer is defined by the way he or she thinks. If the person doesn't think like a believer, doesn't matter what act they do, that person in the eyes of God is not a believer. In the Quran confirms this. In the Quran as well, God says that there are people who will utter certain things and even call upon God, but their hearts or their thinking is different from what they say. It's not what is there in their hearts and what they utter are not the same. So what does this verse tell us? What does the Quran is basically telling us? In Surah 2 verse 204, God says, "Among the people one may impress you with his utterances concerning this life, and may even call upon God to witness his innermost thoughts, while he is a most ardent opponent." So what God is saying is that basically the person is saying all the right things that people like to hear. The person is also even invoking God as a witness of his or her innermost thoughts. Yet God calls the person while he is a most ardent opponent. So this tells us that God doesn't care what you say, or whether even if you take his name, what is deep within you is what matters. What you think is what matters. There may be believers who are not capable of probably articulating their thoughts, but they have the right thoughts, and God is pleased with them. So this is what God is saying. It's not about what you say, it's not about what you do, it's about what you think. What if a believer is dumb? He cannot speak, and deaf, cannot hear. Does that person not qualify to be a believer? Of course, because God looks into the innermost thoughts of the person, the heart of the person. So that is what God is saying. It's not about what you say, what you do. It's all about what is in your hearts. And that is the reason why thoughts are very important. We have to constantly check our thoughts. Because as this Bible verse says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So you are what you think. If you may be giving money, but if you are worshipping money inside your heart, you are not a giver according to God. You may be giving money here and there, but you worship wealth. So what is in your heart is money is an idol for you. Therefore, you are not considered as a charitable person by God. So this is the reason why we have to always check our thoughts. What am I thinking? If you are reluctantly giving money, you don't want to, but what will others think about me? So if you give it, does that count as charity? God says no. Because your thinking is not in the right place. You're not giving it out of mercy, compassion, or concern for another human being, but you are worried about the people. So that's why when you do something, any righteous act, think about what is in my mind. What is in my mind? Am I doing it out of love for the other person? Or am I doing it because that's what is expected of me by some people and I don't want to disappoint them? Am I doing it for the cause of God alone? I only seek the pleasure of God alone? We have to constantly check our thoughts. This is what these verses are teaching us. The wisdom behind these verses are that God is telling, why is God telling us that your thoughts is what I look into? That is in a way telling us that you should be aware of your own thoughts. What are you thinking? Because that's what God matters. Throughout the Quran, we can see verses that speak about the innermost thoughts of people. So many verses in the Quran speaks about your innermost thoughts. The most innermost. Why does God say innermost thoughts? Because it's very deep within you. You may have a very superficial thought. We have different levels of thoughts. We have thoughts that are superficial. We just do it, like that. Very casual. And then there are deep held beliefs within yourself. Very deep held. Very deeply ingrained thoughts within yourself. If you're a person who does not believe in certain things, you can have a wishy-washy thought process. But what is your deep-rooted thought is only what will be exposed by God. So that is what these verses are telling us. These verses are actually talking about our innermost convictions. The verses that speak about our innermost thoughts are talking about our innermost convictions. What are we really convinced about? If we really feel like, I'll give this money, I'll give that money, I'll give charity here, I'll give charity there. But what is our deep-rooted belief? Do we really believe that if I spend in the cause of God, God will multiply it for me? Do you really believe it? Or you say, what if you are here and there? Maybe I'll get it back. So let me just try. Or you are convinced, yes, God will support me. If I spend in His cause, He will repay it back to me in one way or the other. So this is the reason why we have to always check our innermost thoughts. It's a very private thing. You don't have to discuss it with anyone. It's between you and God. What is your innermost convictions? And if you see a lack in there, you have to always seek God's guidance. Say, strengthen me in my faith, in my convictions. Surah 2, verse 284, God says, to God belongs everything in the heavens and the earth. Whether you declare your innermost thoughts or keep them hidden, God holds you responsible for them. So here God says He holds us responsible for our innermost thoughts. No matter what you do with those thoughts, whether you declare it, whether you tell people about it or you don't, God holds you responsible for your innermost thoughts. So that's why we have to check it constantly. If you know that you'll be held responsible for a particular thing, that's where you should focus yourself on, right? What am I thinking when I'm doing these things? Whether I have my thoughts in the right place or not. Because God makes it very clear that He holds you responsible for your innermost thoughts. Whether we declare it or keep them hidden, God holds you responsible. He forgives whomever He wills and punishes whomever He wills. God is omnipotent. In Surah 11 verse 5, God says, "Indeed they hide their innermost thoughts, as if to keep Him from knowing them. In fact, as they cover themselves with their clothes, He knows all their secrets and declarations. He knows the innermost thoughts." So some people try to conceal it. They try to even convince themselves, no, I'm not stingy. I'm not stingy, I'm a giver. They even try to lie to themselves and they try to conceal it. Our God says, you are wasting your time. I know what is there in your heart, deep down inside. What is in your heart, I am fully aware. So you don't even try to hide it. It's very obvious to God, and because He knows our innermost thoughts. And also in Surah 28 verse 69, God says, "Your Lord knows the innermost thoughts hidden in their chests, as well as everything they declare." So everything that we declare, everything that we hold within ourselves, if we hold hate, if we hold anger, if we hold doubts about God and His messenger and the message, the Quran, God is fully aware of it. So that is why God tells the believers, eliminate your doubts. You keep it and you think, I don't know it. I know that you are holding doubts. A believer will be conscious about it and will make an effort to remove those doubts. They will make a very sincere effort to remove those doubts so they can attain certainty. But a disbeliever doesn't, or a hypocrite doesn't care. So they continue with their doubts and then they go on that path. In Surah 48 verse 12, God says, "You secretly believed that the messenger and the believers will be defeated and never come back to their families, and this was firmly established in your hearts." So here God is saying that the hypocrites and the disbelievers who refuse to join the messenger and the believers, deep down inside, although they professed faith, some hypocrites did that. God said that you secretly believed, which means they were hiding it from all the people. Believed that the messenger and the believers will be defeated. They thought, oh, this is Muhammad and these people, they are deluded. They are definitely going to fail. Look at them, they are just a little bit of people and the other army is very strong. And that they will never come back to their families, which means they will die. And this was firmly established in your hearts. They were sure. For sure Muhammad and the people are done. They're going to die. You harbored evil thoughts and turned into wicked people. So they harbored these evil thoughts. And God says consequently, or because of that, they became wicked people. So from this verse, it is very clear to us that what kind of thoughts we hold, that is where we will go to. If you hold evil thoughts in your mind, no matter how efficiently you conceal it from the people, you may convince 1,000 people that you are this or that. But God says what is established in your belief, in your deep inside your heart, is what you will end up being. So if you have doubts, you have hypocritical thoughts, you have disbelief in your heart, no matter how efficiently you conceal it, that is where you will end up. You will end up being a disbeliever. You will end up being a hypocrite. You will end up being, confused in doubts. So if you are a wicked, that's why God says because they held evil thoughts, they turned into wicked people. Such verses tell us that we become what we think deep within ourselves. That's what we end up being. So if you are firmly strong in your belief, your faith, you're correcting your thoughts all the time, you're fixing your thought process. You're trying to stay positive by thinking about God, trusting Him. That means you're fixing your thought process. So the more you do that, the more you become that. The more you become fully submitted to God. You trust Him in all circumstances. Moses, when faced with a huge army and the deep blue sea in front of him, his reaction was, no, my God will guide me. That did not happen in one day. It was a process through which he go, because he was doubtful of even going in front of Pharaoh, because he felt like I can't do this. So that was his first condition. But God says, no, I'm with you. And then he was strengthened. So he reached that conviction gradually. And when he reached to the point where he was facing such imminent danger, he still held on to that belief. No, He will guide me. When everyone around him said, we are finished. So that is the kind that comes because of thought process. Your thought process is already firm in trusting God. All the thoughts that come into your mind is about God and trusting Him, believing in Him, never wavering. So if that's what you feed your mind in situations of danger, that's the first thought that will come into your heart. However, if the thought that you're feeding your mind is of mistrust, distrust in God, if the thoughts that you're feeding in your mind is about despair, hopelessness, and fear, if that's what you're feeding your mind all the time, then that's what will come in circumstances. However, we have to be very careful of what this means. This does not mean that if we think of an ice cream, we get an ice cream. That's not what this means. The Quran is teaching us something more deeper. What this means is that if we think good things, we become good. And if we harbor evil thoughts, we become wicked. So, making sure that our thoughts are purified, are based on God alone, is very important. Thus, the Quran teaches us the importance of having the right or the best thoughts. Now that we know that we are or we become what we think about, let us examine the Quran to understand how we can maintain the best thoughts throughout the day, all the time, under all circumstances. And this is taught in Surah 33 verse 41, where God says, O you who believe, you shall remember God frequently. 62:10, God says, once the prayer is completed, you may spread through the land to seek God's bounties and continue to remember God frequently, that you may succeed. So what is the wisdom behind these verses? Why is God telling us to frequently remember Him, always? It is to maintain the best thoughts, because thinking about God is the best thought. There is nothing better than that. So if you're a person who holds the thought of God in your everyday life all the time, that means you are holding the best thought throughout the day. So this is why it's important to make zikr of God frequently. And this is why these verses exist within the Quran. It is for us to transform our pattern of thinking. We have this tendency to get attached to material possessions, our worldly life, and many things, and that brings our thought process down to the negative. To keep it in the highest place, in the most positive place, God says the only way we can do that is by remembering God frequently. Inshallah, we'll continue the next khutbah. Tubu ilallah, repent. Alhamdulillah, shadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Praise be to God. I bear witness that there is no God but God, and He has no partners. So these verses which speak about remembering God frequently, they are teaching us that we have to maintain the best thoughts, and the way we do that is by turning to the source of all goodness, all that is good, which is God. So if you want to maintain good thoughts in your mind, you turn to God, because He is the source of all righteousness. And that is the only way we can remain in the best thoughts, by continuously and frequently commemorating God. But what about situations of difficulty and challenge? How are we to respond to situations of danger, difficulty, etc.? How can we remain positive and have hope and be hopeful under such circumstances? God gives us the solution to this in the below verse. In Surah 8, verse 45. God says, O you who believe, when you encounter an army, you shall hold fast and commemorate God frequently, that you may succeed. So God says, when you encounter an army, that means you are encountering a danger, a life-threatening situation, a possibility of losing everything or even dying. God says, how do we stay strong? How can we stay strong? We may not face an army every day, but we may have situations of difficulty. We may face something very challenging. So how do we stay in the path? By constantly commemorating God frequently, that you may succeed. So God guarantees success to us. If you want success, maintain the best thoughts. And how do we maintain the best thoughts? By remembering God frequently. Success is guaranteed if we commemorate God during times of difficulty. Commemorating God means thinking the best thoughts about Him, trusting Him, relying on Him, believing in Him, imploring Him, and turning to Him with hope and belief. And the opposite of that is maintaining negative thoughts about God, which is falling in despair, having no trust in Him, hopelessness. And these are thoughts, the negative thoughts. And that happens usually when you are not commemorating God. When God is absent in your thought process, that's when you start looking for others, something else to hold on to. And it will only take you more and more down the path of hopelessness. And defeat will come when we hold unbefitting thoughts about God. And God makes it very clear in the Quran that if you hold negative thoughts about God, and if people think that, no, I'm in a very bad situation, nothing can help me. That's a very wrong thought process. You are thinking that God cannot save you from this. The market is all bad, it's a bad economic situation, it's never going to change. So there's nothing good that's going to come. Well, God's hands are not tied. He's not limited by anything. So if we are believers, we have to hold that thought, that nothing is impossible for God. So thinking in those terms, we are not even aware most of the time that we are thinking that. We are actually thinking negative about God. We'll try to justify it by saying, look around us. Isn't it obvious? But what we are essentially doing is not trusting God, and we are also saying that He is not capable of helping me in this situation. But we don't even realize it. So that's why God says in Surah 33 verse 10, when they came from above you and from beneath you, your eyes were terrified, your hearts ran out of patience, and you harbored unbefitting thoughts about God. So when bad things happen around us, we lose our line of thought. We go into the negative. Your hearts ran out of patience, so we became very frustrated. And this is a situation that happened during war, but there's a lesson for us also. We may not be facing war at this time, but we have these challenges, different various levels of difficulty that may come, or challenging situations. God says that we have to remain steadfast. But if we go into the negative, we are terrified about it, and we react in a negative way, and we start harboring these negative thoughts, then we are definitely going to lose. And a group of believers did that. When the messenger called them, they did not respond also. And therefore, what was the consequence of that? They had a setback. So God is saying that if you want to succeed, you have to hold the best thoughts about God, always, under all circumstances. When we go back and we hold negative thoughts, that's when we end up failing. So to avoid falling into bad thoughts, we first need to be aware where these thoughts are coming from. We cannot avoid negative thoughts without first understanding that. Most people are unaware of their own thoughts. They don't know where it is coming from. They think it is them. It is coming from themselves. Oh, I have these hopeless. I'm in despair. But God tells us you have to be aware. If you're a believer, you have to be aware that there is another opposing entity that puts these thoughts into your mind. And when you reach that awareness that there's something else that is controlling and whispering into your mind these negative thoughts, then you know how to deal with it. If you are unaware of the enemy, you don't even know there's an enemy, then you don't know whether you have to fight it or not. You're totally unaware of it. And that's why God tells us in the Quran about the devil. In Surah 23 verse 97, God says, "Say, my Lord, I seek refuge in you from the whispers of the devil." Why are we seeking refuge in God from the whispers of the devil? Because the devil whispers negativity into your mind. Do not trust God. It's not going to work. It's never going to turn out good. You're done. You're finished. All these thoughts, we think, it's just me, I'm thinking this. But if you're a believer, you're aware that it's coming from another entity. It's being put into your consciousness. And you're believing it is your own thoughts. And you're acting upon it in fear. But if you're a believer, you will immediately recognize it. That this is not from me, it's not from God, it's coming from Satan. And that awareness will make you seek refuge in God. If a person is unaware that the negative thoughts are coming from Satan, he will just go on with his life as it is. This is a daily thing. I feel like this. I messed up. This is working for me. They are never going to seek refuge in God. So this is why God says that we as believers have to be aware of our thoughts. When we see some negative, when we are slipping into negative thinking, we know where it is coming from. It is coming from the devil, our enemy. Therefore, we have to seek refuge in God against his whispers. In Surah 7, verse 200, God says, "When the devil whispers to you any whisper, seek refuge in God." Very important commandment. Seek refuge in God. He is hearer, omniscient. So this is another way how you can overcome your negative thought process. When you first become aware that it's coming from Satan, then you seek refuge in God. That's when God's help will come. Okay, you've identified your problem. Now you're seeking refuge in me. I'm here to help. God responds and takes us out of that situation. This is the reason why God says this. Again, God says in another verse, "When the devil whispers an idea to you, you shall seek refuge in God. He is the hearer, the omniscient." We know that no good idea comes from Satan. The source of all good ideas is God, and all negative ideas is Satan. Satan is the one who commands us to commit evil and vice. Therefore, as this verse also says, we shall seek refuge in God. So by all these verses, God says why we should hold the best thoughts and how we can hold them, how we can maintain the best thoughts by frequently commemorating God, being aware that negative thoughts are coming from Satan, and seek refuge in God. So may God help us all maintain the best thoughts all the time by seeking refuge from Satan and also holding the best thoughts about God. Aqimus salam.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim. Waladdallin. Allahu Akbar. سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم.